remember the date exactly.
I like how you put that. Yes.
Okay. Well, he was hammering on me and saying, blah blah blah, terrorism, and I said, okay, George, I'll flip the model because it's a multidimensional array. I can look at it from row view or column view. And so I flipped the model and I had a look and rooted around and came up with this prediction for a power outage due to terrorism, and that accurately seemed to describe the site of the power outage and its impact.
Yeah.
This, of course, then 3 weeks later became the Northeast power outage.
Right, sure.
And the very first thing that everybody thought of on seeing television or any reports about the Northeast power outage and or experiencing it was terrorism. So we found it because we were looking for terrorism, but there was no terrorism involved, or if there was, it's been covered up to the point where everybody thinks there was none involved.
Sure.
So what we picked up on was the emotional forecast that everybody would think that it would be terrorism. So imagine a situation where you have the whole planet sheeple convinced that bird flu is going to come and eat them all. Well, we would pick up bird flu going to come and eat them all. Make sense?
I don't mean to laugh, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So what we're not picking up. It's not like a prophetic view of events.
Yeah, right.
Rather, it's the if you will, the mindset that's going to originate as a result of some of the events.
Isn't that interesting? Very interesting to put it that way. I know I've had a guy on, Dr. Turi is his name, and I haven't
read
had
about him. Yeah.
Okay. He is mirroring so much of what you have said in the past, and I'm not saying he's copying because he seems to be
sure.
fairly good. Okay.
Methodologies are, if they're valid, are bound to arrive at the same conclusion.
Right. Okay. He is saying that November 8th could really be a very major event. Big earthquake, explosion. He calls it a supernova window.
Okay.
Can you foresee anything at that time, which is like 2 weeks away?
That's still within our... let me have a look here. I've actually got the chart up. That's within what we would call the plateau of the release event.
Yep, right.
So, very definitely, November looks to be extremely shaky. And the 8th, or thereabouts, is also... You have to understand that I also do a lot of mathematics related to hyperspatial or hyperdimensional, however you want to think about it,
sure.
impacts on the planet. The math is relatively easy if you get all these particular astronomy books and plug them into a prologue program.
Right.
Once you've got it down, you just put in the numbers and don't worry about it. It seems to suggest that the lunar transition across the equator on the 30th is going to be the beginning, if you will, of two separate windows in November, one in the early part of November, one in the latter part of November, when the moon does this little shift along with all these other planets relative to starting back up towards the equator. And both of those periods of time have very, very, very high levels of hyperspatial potential for activity. That is to say, the way the planets align around the sun relative to the Earth and the way the moon's jogging around will put stresses on the Earth as a result of the vector equilibriums. In those circumstances, I would say November 8th is at the tail end of a very strong window in the beginning. And then we have another period of time that goes from 19th in the strongest through the 21st, but actually shades all the way up to the end of November.
Yeah, I think he came up, and I'm reading here, he said November 19th, just like you said, there would be an event where a large number of people would need to relocate and start a new life. Interesting.
I keep getting that stuff as well.
Oh, jeez.
Not about that particular date,
right.
but in part and parcel of the general release period.
And then he also says on the 29th, he said he sees an ugly energy of some sort bringing death for many people.
And I wouldn't have put it that way, but we've been picking up since January of this year the concept of specifically the continental United States, but more geopolitical than geographic, and if you will, what we call a rising aspect or a dominant aspect, which has the highest level of all of its emotive sums at the particular time that we're doing the run, and that word was wounding. Now, if you wound a nation, well, that could maybe fit his definition. And see, I don't know his methodology. I've just, as you say,
sure.
I know of some of his results and the fact that he's been pretty spot on there.
Yeah, right. Interesting, though, isn't it?
I find it not gratifying, but satisfying at a level that suggests I'm not going down a dead-end road.
Right, right. And Mark just said, have you ever foreseen anything that's in the Bible about the moon turning a blood red? I think
no. Actually, the last one we got was the moon having yellow fur. The mountains of the moon growing yellow fur.
What?
Yeah, in this last, not in the current run, but one of the last parts of the last run, we had these weird things show up.
Yellow fur.
For us, excessively weird.
Well, I was going to say, what the...
Words that are typical.
Yeah.
They're assigned an emotive value. We deal in emotive sums. We take the sum of all of the words of a particular group of conversations and relate it back to our lexicon and find out which is the most dominant aspect based on the emotional components, the carry value, impact, duration, etc. And then we go from there. And so sometimes this can be extremely misleading.
Wow.
But it is very curious that there's all kinds of discussion about the moon, both at an archetypical level and otherwise.
Yep.
And that our rising aspect says the mountains are going to get covered with yellow fur.
All I can tell you is that
it's going to be a Chinese colony. And,
well,
that's a little on the racial side.
Now, wait a minute.
The Chinese are not yellow. Just like I'm not white, right? I'm sort of this pinkish color. And most Chinese are one of 163 different ethnic groups, and they range from Caucasoid to near Negroid.
Well, yeah, but you just mentioned something interesting, and that is because the Chinese, within a very, very short period of time, will be the major force.
They're already the dominant space force.
They already are.
They already are.
Do you think, just what you said, the mountains of the moon growing a yellow fuzz or something like that?
It was actually fur.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't hair, it was fur. Now that may imply vegetation, might imply say sodium release out of the mountains of the moon, and we get some kind of yellow crystal structures or something.
But the way some of the information comes in to you, it almost could be not allegorical, but maybe referring definitely to the mountains of the moon being flooded with Chinese. Possible.
It could. I can't dispute that. I had not anticipated that might be the kind of thing when I was looking at this, because I was looking more towards an elemental view, thinking, sulfur, sodium, certain conditions. So, no, it could be. Who knows? Yeah. And it could be one of those things that we're totally wrong on.
Yeah. And I won't read each question as a question, but I'm going to bring in a lot what our listeners are sending in, Cliff. Do you see a time or a date, let's say, when there will be an awakening of humanity on planet Earth for a higher spiritual concept?
I think it's already occurred.
Occurred or occurring?
The latter. I mean, it is definitely not a point in time, but rather is the beginning of a period.
Yeah, because what I was even thinking of, as you and I have talked, is going back to the Mayan calendar and going back to some of the prophetic predictions that indigenous peoples around the world have made for thousands and thousands of years.
And it's very much a situation, too, where if one acknowledges that indeed there has been some form of energy shift, which we now can see manifesting on the multitude of planets within our solar system, including our own,
right?
And we can see manifesting within the sun, and then we grant that the material phenomenal world and universe as we understand it does not exist. It's more of an illusion than a reality, and underlying that illusion is vibration. Then it is certainly within the realm of understanding that an energy shift, aka a vibrational shift occurring into the solar system, would, should, and could have an impact on the inhabitants of that solar system, meaning us.
Wow. Jeez.
If you're out looking for it.
Well, yeah, but Cliff, that's awesome, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty all-encompassing what you just said right there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to give myself credit because what I'm trying to do is to present it as Buckminster Fuller would when presenting a total concept, trying to define the context in which the concept exists.
Wow.
And it has all different kinds of levels.
Jeez. Yeah, Larry writes and he says, can we hear the array of images you obtained from your latest runs and your interpretation rather than go off into collateral topics?
Well, they run about 65 or 80 pages.
Could I suggest...
I'm sorry, I mean, but each and every run, I try and cram in as much as I can within the time that we have allowed to type it all.
Wow.
And
geez.
they usually run on the order of 12 or 13 of my pages, and I've been told that racks up to sometimes like 22 browser pages.
Good grief.
And then we do 6 of those in a run, so they truly do get into the many number of pages. So it's actually better, I would think, to ask